I was called the Black Widow, not because I hurt anyone, but because everyone I ever loved ended up leaving me, some through betrayal, others through death. I swore I'd never open my heart again, but the day I met him, a stranger with tired eyes and a broken past, everything changed. I used to think some people were just meant to be alone, that maybe God or fate or whatever force runs this world had made a decision about me, and love just wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't bitter at first, just tired. Tired of holding funerals in my heart, tired of waiting for the next goodbye. When people looked at me, they saw someone strong, someone who moved forward no matter what. But what they didn't see was how much I hated waking up, how I stopped decorating my apartment because I didn't think I'd be around long enough to enjoy it, how silence became safer than any conversation because silence never lied, never left, never died. There was a night not too long ago when I stood at the edge of the city bridge. I wasn't planning to jump, not exactly, but I needed to know how far gone I really was, and I'll never forget how heavy my heart felt that night. Not dramatic, not screaming, just empty, like there was nothing left of me but bones wrapped in sadness. That was the moment I knew I had to either give up completely or find something, someone, to remind me why I ever believed in love in the first place. And that's where this story begins. Not with love, but with loss. Not with fireworks, but with silence. If you've ever felt broken beyond repair, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me until the end. This might just change the way you see love and second chances, because I never thought I'd feel anything again. But then a stranger found me, and somehow saved me from myself. I didn't call myself the Black Widow. Other people did. They laughed when they said it, thought it was clever, dark humor to describe how every man I ever loved seemed to vanish from my life. The first time I heard it, it stung. But after a while, I stopped correcting them, because they weren't exactly wrong. My first real love was in college. His name was Marcus. He had this gentle way of speaking, like he didn't want to disturb the air too much. We were together for 2 years, talked about moving in, getting a dog, all the silly but sweet things young people believe they'll have forever to do. And then he was gone, a hit and run, early one morning while he was out for a jog. Just like that. My heart broke for the first time, and I didn't know hearts could keep breaking over and over after the first time. After that, I stayed single for years. I buried myself in work, convinced myself love wasn't necessary. But grief is sneaky. It doesn't just leave you sad, it leaves you hungry for something to distract you from the pain. That's how I ended up with Julian. He was charming, spontaneous, and full of life. The kind of man who makes you feel like you're standing in the sun just by being near him. But he was also full of lies. Lies about where he'd been, who he was with, how he spent his nights. I found out about the other women, two, maybe three of them, at once, like a crash of cold water. That breakup didn't come with a funeral, but it still felt like a death. And then came Elijah, the last one, the one I truly thought might be it. He was different, quiet, like Marcus, loyal, or so I thought. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. We met through friends, bonded over poetry and late-night conversations, and for once, I let myself breathe, let myself believe I could be loved without being punished. We were engaged after a year. We even picked out wedding colors. But 2 months before the ceremony, he was diagnosed with cancer. And 4 months later, I buried him in a cemetery with a view of the lake, just like he wanted. 3 loves, 3 losses. That's when the nickname started to follow me around. Black Widow. Not because I killed them, but because I was the common thread in every heartbreak. Friends stopped inviting me to weddings. Family whispered when I showed up alone, Again, I started to believe the curse myself, like maybe something inside me was broken, toxic. Maybe I was born to destroy anything that tried to love me. It got to the point where I stopped trying. If a man smiled at me in the grocery store, I looked the other way. If someone flirted, I shut it down fast. I stopped wearing red lipstick, stopped looking in mirrors even. Love had become a language I no longer spoke. And honestly, I didn't miss it. Or at least that's what I told myself. But in the quiet moments, when the world was still and I was alone with my thoughts, I'd wonder, what if it wasn't a curse? What if I just hadn't found the right person? And then, right on the edge of giving up, someone entered my life who didn't see me as cursed, just hurting. And for the first time in a long time, someone stayed. I didn't know then that healing was coming. I just knew I was still breathing. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something. After Elijah's funeral, I didn't just grieve. I disappeared, not physically. I still went to work, paid bills, smiled politely at neighbors, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, I was gone. I went through the motions like a ghost trapped in my own body. People thought I was strong because I never cried in public. But the truth is, I didn't feel much of anything at all. I'd become numb. Numbness was safer than sadness, easier than anger. I didn't trust myself to feel, because the last time I did, it nearly killed me. I developed a routine. Wake up before the sun, shower, get dressed, make coffee I never finished, and head to work. I worked in graphic design back then, just me and my laptop, no real human contact required. I stopped taking calls from friends, ignored texts, deleted my social media. I told myself it was just a break. But days turned into weeks, then months. I forgot birthdays, declined every invitation, and lived on autopilot. The silence that once made me uncomfortable became my comfort zone. I didn't have to explain myself to silence. There were small things that reminded me I was still human, like the way I'd tear up at sad commercials, or how my heart would race when I walked past the old bookstore Elijah and I used to visit. But I'd shove those feelings down fast, bury them deep where they couldn't hurt me. Vulnerability had cost me too much. So I stopped engaging with anything or anyone who might stir it back up. Even strangers noticed. I remember one afternoon standing in line at a coffee shop. A little girl dropped her stuffed animal and started crying. Her mother bent down to comfort her, and instinctively I stepped forward to help. But as soon as our eyes met, I froze. The mother smiled politely, but I couldn't even return it. My body was stiff, like it had forgotten how to respond to kindness. I turned away, ashamed of how far I'd drifted from who I used to be. Dating? Not a chance. Men would approach me at the grocery store, during walks, even at work. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't risk even a simple conversation. I was terrified that letting anyone close would only prove the curse was real. So I kept people at arm's length, smiled with my mouth but not my eyes, and convinced myself I preferred it that way. I even stopped journaling, stopped praying, stopped doing all the things that used to ground me. I didn't want to reflect. I didn't want to hope. Hope was dangerous. One night, I sat alone on my couch with the TV playing in the background. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day. The walls were closing in. I opened a dating app, not to find anyone, but just to remind myself what other humans looked like. I scrolled for 2 minutes before deleting it. The ache in my chest came back like a slow burn, and I remember whispering, "I'm really going to die alone, aren't I?" And somehow that didn't scare me. It just felt expected. I had accepted that life was going to be like this, quiet, distant, hollow. No more surprises, no more love, no more loss. I thought I was protecting myself, building walls for safety. But really, I was building a prison. I didn't know it yet, but someone would come along and start gently breaking down those walls, not with grand gestures, not with promises, but with patience. And sometimes that's all we really need, someone willing to stay long enough for us to find our way back. It was a Thursday night, cold, damp, and heavy, with the kind of fog that makes everything feel a little more lonely than it already is. I had just left work late again. My boss didn't expect it from me, but I stayed anyway, just to avoid going home to my own silence. The city was alive around me, headlights and honking, and people rushing somewhere with purpose. I had nowhere to be. I walked instead of calling a ride. I thought the cold air might clear my head, maybe even numb the ache that had settled into my chest months ago. But halfway down a long block, something in me snapped. No warning, no buildup, just sudden, sharp panic clawing its way through my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see straight. My legs locked up and I felt my knees give way, right there on the sidewalk, next to a vending machine and a flickering street light. I didn't want help. I didn't want eyes on me. I just wanted to disappear into the ground and never come back. And then someone knelt beside me. He didn't touch me, didn't ask if I was okay, because I very obviously wasn't. He just crouched quietly, his voice calm and low. "You're all right. Don't rush it. Just breathe." I don't know why I listened to him. Maybe it was the tone or the fact that he didn't make a scene or try to fix me. He didn't crowd me. He didn't tell me it was all gonna be okay, which would have felt like a lie anyway. He just sat there in silence, breathing slowly, as if to guide mine back into rhythm. And when I finally inhaled without shaking, I looked up and really saw him. He had kind eyes, not the dazzling movie star kind. Tired eyes, soft around the edges. The kind that told you he'd seen things too. Hurt, maybe even worse than me. His coat was frayed at the sleeves, like he'd worn it through many winters, and his scarf had a hole near the end. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a human. "I'm okay," I whispered, even though it was a lie. He nodded, stood up slowly, then offered his hand, not to pull me up, just to be there if I needed it. And somehow, I did. I let him help me to my feet. My legs wobbled like a newborn deer, but I didn't fall. He didn't ask my name, didn't offer his. He just said, "Do you need to sit somewhere warm?" I nodded, and we ended up in a tiny all-night diner a few blocks away. I didn't eat, just sat with a glass of water while he ordered coffee and kept glancing out the window, like he was giving me space even from across the table. We barely spoke. He told me the coffee was terrible, but it was the best kind for nights like this. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it had been months since my throat made that sound. He looked surprised, but didn't comment. I think we both understood something unspoken had just passed between us. When I finally said I needed to go home, he didn't ask where that was. He didn't push or pry. He just nodded again and said, "You don't have to do it all alone." Then he left a $5 bill on the table and walked out into the night without waiting for me to follow. I stood there for a full minute after he left, stunned. Who was he? Why didn't he ask for my number? Why didn't he want anything from me? I kept thinking about his words. "You don't have to do it all alone." That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't sleep well, but I slept. And in the morning, the memory of his presence lingered. Not as something magical or romantic, but something safe. I didn't expect to ever see him again. I figured he was just one of those brief flashes of humanity that life throws your way when you're close to the edge. A reminder that not everyone is trying to take something from you. That maybe, just maybe, there are people who exist simply to remind others they still matter, even if just for a moment. But life had other plans. because a week later, I saw him again. And this time, it didn't feel like coincidence. I wasn't even supposed to be at the bookstore that day. I'd told myself I'd stop going. Too many memories, too many ghosts, sitting in my favorite chair, breathing through the pages of books I once shared with someone now gone. But something pulled me in that morning. I don't know what it was. Maybe I just needed to be around quiet things. Or maybe I was hoping for something I couldn't name. The bell above the door jingled, and I walked straight to the poetry section. It was muscle memory at this point. My fingers brushed over the same titles, the same dusty spines, and I felt that familiar ache rise up in my chest. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of old paper. And then I heard it. That same quiet voice. "You're into Neruda?" he asked, not with judgment or flirtation, but genuine curiosity. I turned, slowly. There he was, the stranger from the diner. Same coat, same scarf, same tired eyes. I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming him up. But he smiled softly, as if he could see the disbelief written all over my face. "I didn't think I'd see you again," I said before I could stop myself. "Neither did I," he replied, then added, "but I'm glad I did." He didn't ask for my number, again, didn't rush the moment. He just stood there beside me, looking at the books like we'd met there a dozen times before. After a while, we both ended up sitting on the little bench in the corner of the store, books in our laps, barely saying anything. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. Or maybe we weren't running into each other at all. Maybe we were just gently orbiting, slowly pulling closer without admitting we wanted to. We never called them dates, just coffee, or walks, or shared silence at the park. I still didn't know his full name. He didn't know mine. But we started talking. Not about big things at first. He told me he hated eggs. I told him I hated rainy Wednesdays. He admitted he once cried during a toothpaste commercial. I confessed I still sleep with the TV on because silence makes me anxious. We weren't confessing traumas, just offering little pieces of our humanity, scraps of truth that didn't weigh too much. One day, we sat on a bench outside the museum after it had closed. The sky was this deep orange gray, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. And without looking at me, he said, "I know pain when I see it. I see it in you." I didn't flinch. I didn't run. For once, I just nodded. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's there." He waited a moment, then turned to me, his voice soft. "You don't have to tell me your story, but if you ever want to, I'll listen. No judgment, no advice, just ears." Something cracked open in me right then, not all the way, just a hairline fracture in the wall I'd built around my heart. Because people always want to fix you, don't they? They want the short version, the quick turnaround. They want you healed by next week. But he didn't. He was offering presence, not solutions. And that was more powerful than anything I'd ever known. I started looking forward to our meetings. I started waking up with a little less dread. I noticed the way the sunlight spilled through my curtains. I caught myself humming while brushing my teeth. These tiny changes, barely noticeable to anyone else, were monumental to me. It was like life was stretching her hand out again, asking me to dance. And for the first time in years, I didn't say no right away. He never made grand romantic gestures. No flowers, no big declarations, just quiet consistency, thoughtful questions, a warmth that wrapped around me like a well-worn blanket. I still told myself it wasn't love. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I couldn't be. But something in me knew, whatever this was, it mattered. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't even know if I could survive another heartbreak. But with him, the fear started to feel lighter, like maybe it wouldn't crush me this time. And slowly, day by day, I began to wonder, What if this wasn't the beginning of another tragedy? What if it was the start of something I never thought I'd get again? Hope. I should have been happy. That's what I kept telling myself. I should have felt lucky, even to feel anything again after all the pain, all the losses. Wasn't that what I'd secretly wanted? But the truth is, when your heart has been broken enough times, love doesn't feel safe. It feels like standing on a cliff with no railing. Beautiful, yes, but terrifying. The more time I spent with him, the more I felt my heart thawing. The more it thawed, the more it scared me. I was falling, slowly, unwillingly, into something real, something gentle, something unlike anything I'd known before, and that made it harder, not easier. Because when you've convinced yourself you're unlovable for so long, being loved can feel like a trap, like the beginning of another ending. So I did what I knew how to do. I started to pull away. At first, it was subtle. I'd take longer to reply to his messages. I'd cancel our meetups with vague excuses. I'd laugh a little less, hold eye contact a little shorter. And he noticed. Of course, he noticed. But he never called me out directly. He just gave me space, like someone standing at the edge of a forest, waiting for you to walk out on your own. One night, we were sitting in his car outside my apartment. The heater was humming softly, and neither of us had spoken in minutes. I stared at my hands. I didn't know how to say the words forming in my chest, but I had to try. I don't think I can do this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He just looked at me with those same steady eyes. I'm not asking you to do anything, he said gently. I'm just here. That response broke something in me, not because it was romantic, but because it was true. He wasn't trying to force love. He wasn't demanding a label or a promise or even a feeling in return. He was just there. And that kind of presence, quiet, patient, unwavering, was the scariest and most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. Still, the fear didn't go away. I spent days battling myself. I'd wake up thinking of him and immediately remind myself that it couldn't last. I'd replay our conversations, trying to find flaws, cracks, reasons to leave before he could. I convinced myself he deserved someone better, someone less damaged, someone who hadn't buried love 3 times and come out colder on the other side. But no matter how hard I tried to push him away, he never closed the door. One evening, I sat on my bathroom floor with the lights off, just breathing in the dark. The weight of it all, my past, my fear, this new feeling growing inside me, it was too much. I cried, not loudly, just quiet tears that slipped down like confessions. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't crying because I didn't want to love him. I was crying because I already did. That scared me more than anything, because love meant risk. Love meant letting someone in far enough that they could hurt you, and I had spent so long keeping people out. But here was this man, standing quietly in the corners of my life, asking nothing from me but truth. The next time we met, I didn't pretend. I told him everything, not all at once, not in a dramatic monologue, just slowly, piece by piece. I told him about Marcus, about Julian, about Elijah, about how grief had become my shadow, how I'd started believing I was cursed, how I thought loving me came with consequences. I expected him to look at me differently, but he didn't. He didn't offer pity or try to reassure me that it wasn't my fault. He just listened, fully, completely, like my pain wasn't too much for him, like I wasn't too much. And when I finished, when there was nothing left but silence between us, he reached out and held my hand. No words, just a gentle squeeze that said, I see you, all of you, and I'm still here. In that moment, I realized something. Maybe the point wasn't to stop being afraid. Maybe the point was to love through the fear. Maybe I wasn't cursed. Maybe I was just finally being seen. Healing doesn't happen all at once, no matter what people say. There isn't one big breakthrough, one teary night that fixes everything. Healing is slow, it's quiet, it's repeating the same scared steps until, one day, they don't feel as heavy. And for me, healing started with him. This quiet man who showed up in my life like a whisper, not a storm. After I told him everything, I thought I'd feel empty, like all my pain had been emptied out of me and I'd be left hollow. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: light. Not joy, not relief, just lightness. Like I wasn't carrying it all alone anymore. He never treated me like I was fragile. He didn't handle me with gloves. He just treated me like a person. Some days we talked, other days we didn't. Some days I needed to be held. Other days I needed space. And no matter where I landed, he met me there. No pressure, no timeline. I remember one afternoon we sat in a quiet park with a picnic blanket and sandwiches. It wasn't a special occasion. We weren't celebrating anything. But the way he looked at me that day, like I wasn't broken, like I was becoming, I felt something shift. I laughed at one of his terrible jokes, the kind that usually made me roll my eyes, and he just smiled like it was the first time he'd ever seen me laugh. I realized I wanted to laugh more around him. I wanted to see the world the way he saw it, a little softer, a little kinder. I started doing small things for myself again. I bought new sheets, lit candles before bed, played music while cooking instead of eating in silence. These sound like tiny details, but for me, they were milestones. Signs that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. I began journaling again, too. Not every day, and not always about love. Sometimes just a sentence or two about what I noticed. A child's giggle in a cafe, the smell of rain before a storm, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. I wrote about gratitude, about fear, about not knowing what would come next, but being okay with that for once. We never sat down and had the talk. There was no official moment where we declared ourselves a couple. We just slowly grew into each other's lives. I met his sister at some point, and he met my neighbor's dog that I'd sort of adopted emotionally. We started cooking meals together and picking shows to binge watch. The mundane things, the real things, the things that build something steady. And of course, I still had bad days. Days when I flinched at the idea of losing him. Days when a smell or a song would bring memories crashing back. But the difference was, I didn't face those days alone anymore. He didn't try to erase my past. He held space for it. He let my grief live beside our growing love. One night, I woke up crying, a nightmare about Elijah. I felt so ashamed, like maybe I was betraying this new man by still dreaming of the one I lost. I tried to hide it, but he noticed. He sat up, pulled me close, and just said, "You don't have to pretend." That was it. Just permission to be real. And that's when I knew I was safe. Love, as I was learning, didn't have to be dramatic or painful or full of conditions. It could be quiet, steady. Love could sit with you in your worst moments and not ask you to be anything else. It could look like a hot cup of tea on a hard morning, or a slow dance in the kitchen when no music's playing. It could feel like staying. We never used the word forever. That wasn't important to me anymore. I'd learned that forever was fragile, but presence, showing up again and again, that was something I could believe in. I stopped calling myself a black widow. That label didn't fit anymore. I wasn't cursed. I was healing. And love hadn't been the thing that broke me. It had always been the thing that tried to save me. I just hadn't met the right love yet. Until now. Looking back now, I realize I didn't need saving from love. I needed saving from the belief that I wasn't worthy of it. I spent so long building walls, calling it strength, calling it survival. But healing began the moment I let someone in, not to fix me, not to rescue me, but to see me, fully, truthfully, gently. He didn't erase my past. He stood beside it, honored it, and made room for a new chapter, one built on presence, patience, and peace. I'm not the same woman I was before. I still carry my scars, but now I carry them with grace, with softness, with hope. To anyone listening who's ever been told they're too broken to be loved or too complicated to be chosen, please hear me. You are not a burden. You are not a curse. You are simply human. And love, real love, can still find you. If this story touched you in any way, I ask you to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little light right now, because sometimes all it takes is one voice, one story, to remind us we're not alone, and love can still begin again.